Hi, everyone. Welcome to this Ask a Biller seminar, Understanding Reimbursement Raises and Resigning. My name is Avery. I've been working in the healthcare industry for 3 years, actually at SimplePractice. And just after spending a bunch of time working with clinicians and their insurance situations and everything, it just became extremely apparent to me how important understanding insurance is because it plays such a huge role in everybody getting help and everything. So I'm feeling pretty good being able to be helping host this webinar and kind of disseminating information out there to people who might need it. Um, and then, the woman of the hour, Barbara Griswold. She's a practice consultant and the author of Navigating the Insurance Maze. Right now it's in its 8th edition, so go and check that out. She just celebrated 30 years in private practice, and her goal is to help therapists feel as confident about their businesses as they do about their therapy. So she invites you to her website, theinsurancemaze.com, where you can ask her questions. I'm just going to mention the fact that these Ask a Biller videos, there's a whole series of them. You can go to simplepractice.com/askabiller series to go ahead and view them all. All you have to do is type in your email, and all those little locks down there that you see on some of those will disappear, and you can go ahead and view them all. So if there are any particular topics you want to go over and get a little bit more information about, you can go check that out and watch them. So now, just to get to some questions here. So the first thing we're going to touch on here is reimbursement rates. The first question from Sandy L is, I charged the insurance plan $150 for a session, but on the explanation of benefits, it listed $100 as the allowed amount. What is an allowed amount?
Right. So I want to start out with this question because, well, first of all, I divided all the questions into 3 sections. We've got we're going to be talking about reimbursement rates, just kind of in general, your questions about that. Then we'll talk about raises, which I know is a big question for us. And then about resigning. So just to kind of let you know that there's 3 sections here. So the allowed amount, what is that? It really depends if you're an in-network provider or an out-of-network provider. And let's be clear what those are. Network provider means you've signed up with an insurance plan, you signed a contract, and you're submitting claims for those clients of that plan, and you are offering a discounted rate and all that stuff. So out-of-network is anyone who has never signed a contract with that particular insurance plan. You are automatically an out-of-network provider. You don't need to do anything. So the allowed amount means different things. If you're a network provider, basically it's your contracted rate, the rate that you agreed to when you signed up with that plan to accept. So if I'm charging 150, as is in this example, and they come back and they say, well, $100 is your allowed amount. Basically what they're saying is, hey, you can bill for 150, but the contracted rate that we have between us is $100, and that's what we're going to go based on. We're not going to allow you your full $150. If you're out of network and you've billed, your client has paid you the 150 up front, and you give them a super bill or invoice, they turn it into their insurance plan. The insurance plan may say, well, it's nice that you're charging 150, but we think that's too much, basically. We think we're only going to allow $100, and I'm just making up these numbers. We think that that's really the usual, customary, and reasonable rate for that service provided by that kind of provider. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more in a future questions here about how they come up with those numbers, because sometimes we're kind of surprised. But the bottom line is these are both, that out-of-network provider allowed amount is something that they've determined, and each plan determines it differently. What is an acceptable amount that they're willing to pay for that service. And again, back to network provider, that's clearer. You have already contracted with that. You've already agreed to that allowed amount. So it's the amount, basically the allowed amount is all the plan is going to consider for that, the amount that they consider reasonable for that service.
Let me ask you, Barbara, there's been at least a couple of circumstances where I've seen people accidentally bill lower than their contracted rate. And it seems like the insurance company sometimes is more than happy to pay what they are asking for, even though it's less than their rate. Does that ever happen? Or?
Sure. There's certain situations, I don't want to kind of encourage this too much, but where if you accidentally or on purpose, sometimes you might give a sliding scale fee to someone in network. It's not usually the case. But anyway, if you accidentally lower it, they absolutely are going to go with whatever your billed amount is going to be. They're not going to pay more than you. They're not going to say, hey, knock, you should charge more than this. But definitely as an out-of-network provider, you have every right to slide your fee all over the place down to $10 or up $0 or whatever. You just need to reflect that amount on your super bill or invoice when you turn it into the insurance plan, and then they will see whether that's within their usual, customary, and reasonable rate. And again, that's called a UCR, or usual, customary, and reasonable rate, or allowed amount. Those are all the same terms for what we think is reasonable for that bill. So this is their way of keeping us from just increasing our rates and saying, oh, they're paying $200. Why don't I charge $250? Why don't I charge $300? This is their way of saying, we're capping this.
So the next question we have here from KDR, what do insurance plans base their reimbursement rates on?
Good question. All right, so just some key factors. We'll go through them quickly. Some of these are in the mental health parity law that allow insurance plans to use some, what do we want to call them, factors to adjust rates between different services and different therapists. So one is your location. That's a huge one. A therapist in Beverly Hills might be paid a lot more than a therapist in Bakersfield or in the middle of the sticks. So they're going to look at your zip code. They're going to look at what they call the geographic market. So what area are you in, and what are the rates in your area? Another one is just the demand for services in your area. If there's a lot of therapists, there's a lot of clients, they're going to look at that and the need for services in your area. And they're going to look at, this is one that isn't exactly on there, but sometimes they can even look at their need for providers in your area. If they really need you in the area, they don't have enough therapists, they might pay more. So that is the next one, provider supply in the area. So if you're located in a very densely populated area, which has a ton of therapists, and they have enough therapists, they may not have the need to pay you more than someone else. Your practice size may be a factor. They may be willing to pay groups more because the group may be able to give multidisciplinary options to the insurance plan, or maybe the provider group has negotiated, because they have so many things to offer and because they have one billing site and kind of certain things are easier. Instead of the insurance plan having to write 15 checks, it's all done through one group. It simplifies things. They may be able to pay more, get more. Provider license is a huge one. Excuse me. Provider license is a huge one. If a psychologist and MFT were both applying to the same insurance plan, probably the psychologist is going to be paid more, reimbursed more. It could just be based on experience and training. Service type, the CPT code that you're providing is definitely a big factor. They're going to pay different amounts perhaps for a diagnostic interview versus just a psychotherapy session. Now, how is the UCR that we talked about, the usual, customary, reasonable fee? Sometimes it's an average of what other similar providers in your area or even nationwide charge for that service. So it often is like 75 or 80% of what the average is for what similar providers in your area charge. So they have their own little formulas, is basically what I'm saying. And they're allowed to have their own little formulas, and it varies from insurance plan to insurance plan. Also, private health plans may use some percentage of the Medicare rate. So even though you're not a Medicare provider, they may be basing it on the Medicare rate. So it's all these weird things that are out there, and sometimes it's a lot of who knows. I don't even know sometimes why some insurance plans seem to have a very high UCR and some have a much lower one.
So the next question, my colleague who has the same license as I do and works nearby gets paid more by the plan than I do. Why is this? From Sean F.
Right? I get this question all the time, and uh, the only things I can guess, these are like guesses. One is a successful raise request. Maybe your colleague asked for a raise somewhere along the line and got it. And we're going to be talking about raises a lot more later, but that is definitely some possibility. It's possible that your colleague has a different license. I think in this question, though, it was mentioned that they didn't have a different license. Different location, even though it may be that this person's located nearby, which the question said, it could be a different zip code, it could be a different, it may seem close to you, but to the insurance plan who's located, in another state, they may have you just listed as a different zip code, and that's good enough to give a different dollar amount. Another one is, and this seems weird, but joined later. I know some of the plans I've been with 28 years, and I see new people come along, and I know some of them are getting paid more than I am. And I have a feeling, again, we're going to talk about this later, that some of them, the insurance plans just never really passed along increases to me, since I'm such an old provider, basically. And yet when these people joined, they were put on at a higher rate. So I kind of think that sometimes if you never ask for a raise, you can't just sit back and hope that they come along and give you one. I have a feeling that rates go up over time, and sometimes veteran providers are not offered those. I'd like to think that's not true, but I suspect that, let's say, put that way. And the biggest answer I have for this is that it seems to me often a complete mystery why providers that I talk to, and we're really not supposed to talk about our rates because we all have independent contracts, and that's a whole nother topic, but it's kind of a complete mystery as to why if you gathered a room of 25 providers with the same insurance plan, that are on the same insurance plan, you might have people having 25 different rates. I'm not sure why it's not more that everyone's getting the same rate. So I think that's part of the weird mystery magic of insurance plans, is there's a lot that's behind curtains that we really don't really know why.
Next question, why is it difficult to obtain reimbursement rates before joining a plan? From Marissa G.
Yeah, this one's like, you should be able to, people are always coming to me and saying, I really want to join an insurance plan, but how do I know which ones are, can I just call them up and ask them like what they pay so I can know whether it's worth my time to go through the applying and filling out paperwork and trying to join them. And the interesting thing you'll probably find is if you were to call insurance plans and say, hey, I'm an MFT or I'm an LCSW, what do you reimburse people? They often will not tell you ahead of time. You have to, because then they would have to look up your zip code, they would have to look at your whole situation, whatever. And they pretty much, in general, most plans will not tell you ahead of time. You have to make a formal application. If they're interested in you, they will take the time to send you a contract, and then the contract will say, sometimes not very clearly, sometimes then you have to like call up and say, what does this mean? 75% of the Medicare rate. What is the Medicare rate? Sometimes it very clearly lays out for each CPT code what you can imagine that you're going to be paid or what you will be paid. But sometimes you have to go through the whole process of applying to find this out. I don't know all the reasons. Maybe insurance plans just don't want to bother going and looking up for each person who calls them, what the zip codes are, what the formula is for their area, and their license, and the CPT codes. Maybe they don't want to bother.
Do all health plans pay the same rate for the same service? From Aritza J.
Yeah, I was going to say I wish. I'm not sure I wish. It depends what the health plan is. No, definitely not. So that would make some sense, but no, each health plan, again, is an independent company, and they have the right or the ability to, for each CPT code, to say what they think they're going to pay, and it may vary depending on, as we said, depending on your location and depending on lots of things, but they definitely, if you compare each health plan, you're going to find every health plan pays something different for the same service.
What about telehealth? Is telehealth reimbursed at the same rate as in-person? Will coverage rates be going down in the future? From Ellen, a good one.
So I put it under Ellen's name, but we actually had a lot of questions about telehealth, and I was kind of like, yeah, I know that that's what's on everyone's mind, but it's a little bit off what our topic is today. But I stuck them all in here today, saying, you know, I'll touch on telehealth today, but for the most part, that's a whole other topic. And I think our next Ask a Biller is a telehealth update. Avery, maybe you can remind me if it isn't. But anyway, the general issue about reimbursement is that telehealth is not always reimbursed at the same rate as in person. It depends what state you're in. It depends what kind of, so if your state has telehealth parity laws that protect, parity means they have to pay at the same coverage parity, excuse me, there's coverage parity and payment parity. If they have payment parity laws, which says that they have to pay telehealth at the same rate as in person, then you're probably good. Unfortunately, not all states, and I don't even think half the states, have payment parity laws. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't pay at the same rate, but it just means they don't have to pay at the same rate. So it is possible that you could be doing telehealth and not be reimbursed at the same rate for in-person. I haven't heard a lot of people tell me that that's happening to them, but I have heard some people say that, a few people around the country are saying that to me, that they are seeing their telehealth reimbursed at a lower rate. I'm hoping that that is something that we're going to see not happening again, that we're going to see legislation in each state. Don't look for I mean, there's going to be federal legislation, but really this has got to happen on a state by state basis, because states really rule what happens in their state according to telehealth and reimbursement. And so definitely all I can tell you is go to your state, go to your professional associations, try to be very advocate for this at the state level. But and in terms of whether will coverage rates be going down in the future, I hope not. I can't see around the corner. I don't have my crystal ball, but I don't think so. I would like to say that we're going to see more telehealth. We're going to hopefully see more legislation passed to support that, and I don't see any reason why coverage rates should be going down in the future, but who knows?
So the next topic here is raises. You want to say anything about that really quickly, Barbara?
Well, we'll just, this is probably the number one question I get as, well, no, let's just jump in.
First question, will health plans automatically increase my reimbursement rates over time to reflect my length of time on the panel or cost of living increases? From Megan E.
Well, Megan, wouldn't that be nice? Like I said, I've been on some of my panels 28, 30 years, and, you know, some of those plans I only got, you know, one raise or cost of living increase or something. You know, it's just no. I would say you cannot rely on the insurance plans. I'd say lately I've gotten a few from a couple plans, but you can't rely on that for all the plans that you work with, that cost of living increases or that they'll come along. So I guess I want to say this other thing, and this is a little to the side, but sometimes I have people calling me, therapists, for consultations, and they're really complaining about the rates. And they're like, the rates are so low, the rates are so low, the rates are so low. And I totally agree with you, but at the same time, what I want to say to them is, you agreed to this rate when you signed up. So, always before you sign on with the panel, please look at the rates closely. Don't just sign anything, which we sometimes do. Look carefully. Do not sign any contract until you look at that rate and you say to yourself, can I live with that rate? We don't want to get resentful over something that we agreed to in the first place, right? And then obviously, if in time you're like, yeah, I can no longer agree to that without being resentful, then we need to look at resigning, which is the next section. So, but yes, are asking for a raise. So no, the answer to this, Megan, is that no. Sometimes health plans will increase your reimbursement rates over time, but you can't always count on that.
Next question, can you really get a raise from a health plan? From Sasha W.
Yeah, so this is something a lot of people don't realize. I was stuck in this one therapist survey. It's a little old, but still, that low reimbursement rates was the biggest therapist complaint about insurance panels by far. And this does not surprise anyone listening here. I mean, that's probably all of our biggest complaints. Yet 61% had never asked for a rate increase. And when I go around and I ask people, why haven't you? Either people didn't know that that was even a possibility. Oh, I can ask for a raise. And I call it a rate increase because we're not really technically raise. Raise is somebody if you're a salaried individual, but rate increase. But 61% of us had never asked for a rate increase. What? We don't either know it was a possibility, or the ones who know it's a possibility said, well, they're not going to give me one. Now, like, what would we say to our clients if they said, well, I'm not going to ask for something because I don't think I'm going to get it? We would say, well, you got to try, babe. So you're definitely not going to get it if you don't ask for it. And you do have a chance if you ask. So here's a very interesting survey, finding 40% of those who had requested a rate increase had been successful. Now, 40% is a pretty good number. And in my past, I have asked for raises, and I would say my number is probably not that high of 40% of my raise, but I definitely would be one of those people who said, yes, I have requested raises, and I have been successful probably, I don't know, 5 times in the times that I've asked. And I haven't asked as many times as I should, but bottom line is, yes, this can happen, Sasha, and we all should try it instead of grumbling. Definitely try it, and at least we can find out whether we would have had a chance.
Can I negotiate a higher reimbursement rate before joining a plan? From Vidya G.
Yeah, so before joining a plan, it's a little tough. It can be done. I've done it before myself. If you're in a hurry to get on a plan, this will usually delay you getting on a plan. And sometimes joining a plan can take shortest time, probably 3 months, more likely 6 months, sometimes 9 months. So if you're like in a hurry and they comes back to you and they say, okay, we're willing to have you come on our plan, here's the rates, and you now want to negotiate it, it can now delay it longer as you go back and forth. Or you say, hey, I want to join, but I don't like those rates. I want to, negotiate something higher. I would do this if you are bilingual, if you have something really hot that you think they're going to pay more for. And language is probably the number one thing. We're going to talk about that, but you can often get that. I negotiated a raise before joining a plan that was an EAP, Employee Assistance Program, because I had critical incident stress debriefing training, and I had provided mandatory wellness workshops, or I guess employee training for like substance abuse and sexual harassment trainings at employers. So if there's something that you think you might be able to get paid more for right in the door, that you might be able to get up front. But again, just know that that might delay you getting on the panel a little bit.
Next question, what should I say to the health plan when asking for a raise? from Min M.
Ooh, okay, lots. I put together 2 whole slides on this because it's like such a big topic. All right, so like I said, the biggest you're going to highlight in a letter. I would put together like a letter, what makes you stand out, and we'll talk about a little bit more what the steps are. But what are the things you're going to highlight to them? How are you different? This is a question I would ask yourself. How are you different than all the therapists in your office or that you know? What makes you more valuable to the insurance plan that they might be willing to pay more for you? So one is bilingual or multilingual. If you speak other languages, sign language, anything that you can now address some populations that they maybe, just English speakers are not able to. One thing I didn't put on here is if you have multiple office locations, that used to be more important. Now with telehealth, not so much, but still, I think that's something I would highlight because many health plans still want to see have providers who do have office locations for those clients who do want to be seen in person. What are your specialties? And please don't just highlight anxiety, depression, couples. They kind of expect us all to do anxiety and depression. So go beyond that. What are your specialties that maybe they would really need on their panel? A couple suggestions I have in here, like addictions. If you have that kind of training or experience, put that on here. Eating disorders, if you've ever worked with that population. Your experience and training in evidence-based treatments. They're very big now on evidence-based treatments. So any training or experience you have in brief, symptom-focused treatment like CBT, DBT, EMDR, they may pay more for EMDR. ABA, for those of you who work with autistic kids, mindfulness-based stress reduction. So anything like that, that's kind of training that you've had. Specialized training, as I said, in critical incident stress debriefing, wellness workshops that you can go into an employer and teach how to survive the holidays, or you can teach, stress reduction, or you can teach anger management, or those kind of lunchtime things. Employee assistance programs really like that. If you use objective tests to measure symptoms and track progress, they love this. Excuse me. This is something that if you're going to be around a while in this field, you're probably not going to have to gravitate to, but it is something that more and more insurance plans are probably going to be gravitating to wanting us to do. And so being able to show that we are benefiting clients and we are showing that we're able to measure progress, symptoms, having those kind of objective tests like the GAD-7, PHQ-9, the Burns Anxiety Inventory. There's all kinds of little tests that you can give. And as a side note, you can sometimes charge insurance a little extra for giving those tests, or even just having the clients fill them out online. So if you want more information about that, I'm going to give you at the end of this, or in the middle of this, I'm going to give you a web address for you to ask any follow-up questions or of me. I'm going to answer all of them, or to basically get more information about some of this stuff. Okay, so special populations. Do you work with LGBT, especially if you have kind of a trans focus, or you're very comfortable, or you have a lot of training working with trans folks, veterans, children and teens. That's usually many health plans don't have enough providers for children or teens. A couple other things. Highlight diversity. Diversity is a big buzzword right now. Not only your familiarity working with a diverse population, immigration issues, acculturation issues, but highlight yours. If you are a therapist of color, if you are, however you want to identify yourself, if you're a non-Caucasian, and you're able to say that, basically you may help them meet a network inadequacy you want to fill their diversity of providers, right? So highlight that, use it. Just tell them if you're a therapist of color, tell them you're an Asian therapist, tell them you're a whatever. If you have unusual availability, like weekends, that's nice to highlight. If you have old experience, I call it, even if you don't want these referrals, what I'm talking about there, maybe when I was an intern associate, I served in a chemical dependency treatment hospital. And do I want addicts in my practice now? Maybe not, but definitely just tell them that you have experience working with chemically dependent, people, and that's really informs your practice now in terms of your ability to assess for that or whatever. Or you worked in a severe mental health clinic or with severe diagnosis or dual diagnosis. Don't be afraid that if you tell them these things, you're going to now have a glut of referrals about that. You're just saying, look, I've got all this terrific experience. Other things, if it's impressive, how long have you been with the plan? How long since raised? How many members do you see? Are you a high volume provider? Do you have a lot of their clients? That's kind of, and you notice how often I use the word members. That's how they refer to them. So I usually don't use the word clients when I'm talking to a health plan. I talk about members. All right, and a couple other just quick tips. Don't assume you have none of what I've just outlined that you can't get a raise. Go ahead, put your best foot forward and ask for one. I would say I am half the time wrong about if I guess who's going to get a raise. It seems like such a dice roll to me. Half the people that I think this one is going to surely get a raise because of her experience, she doesn't get it. And then I think that one is definitely not going to get a raise because they've really kind of a garden variety therapist. They really don't have any specialties and they get one. So don't make any assumptions. Also, don't whine. Focus on what makes you worth more money. Don't be saying, oh, my kid needs, an orthodontia appointment and I have these bills to pay, and, don't kind of yell at them for not increasing your raise. You might mention it, but don't talk about student loans you have outstanding. Focus on, I'm worth more money. And here's another weird tip that could be used in certain situations, but you can go on the plan's provider directory, which is public, and I've done this a lot, and try to prove that you have something that the provider needs, that you are going to help them meet a network inadequacy. For example, one of my clients that I was coaching somebody to get a raise, and she spoke, I can't remember let's just say she spoke Spanish. And so we went on the provider directory and we typed in Spanish speaking providers, in her area, and she was able to see that this plan only had 3 providers in her zip code that spoke Spanish. So now she can use that in her argument. She can say, hey, plan, you only have 3 Spanish speaking providers in our zip code. That's not good. That's not enough. So if you can give some hard facts, that can be helpful. And the provider directories are online. If you need help finding some of them, I'm able to help with that.
Really handy. All right. What is the best way to request a raise after working with an insurance company for over 3 years? From Cheryl L.
Great question. So here's the steps basically for anyone, no matter if it's been 3 years or 20 years. You're going to write a raise request letter. And that's something I can help you customize, but I'm also going to give you a sample. If you stay tuned, I'm going to give you a sample that you can download instantly when this is over. Then call the health plan. You're going to want to probably talk to provider relations and just say, look, I want to know where to send my letter to ask for a rate request letter. Yeah, but I want you to have your letter already written, because be prepared to give your pitch on the phone, because it happened to me one time. I called them and asked them, where do I send my letter? And she said, well, I can just talk to you about it right now. And I was like, like, I'm so glad I've already written this and I have my little bullet points and I have my little pitch ready. So that's why I put number 2 as number 2 instead of number 1. So I was able to, in that phone call, talk to her on the phone. And that was actually one of the times I was able to get a um, raise. Interestingly, though, I'll just share this. On the phone, she said, well, how much of a raise do you want? And I was like unprepared for that question a little bit. I had written most of the letter, but I hadn't quite finished it to that. And so I asked for a number and she said, okay. And I thought to myself, oh, I should have asked her more. So again, be prepared, which we'll talk a little bit more later, but for how much you exactly want for each CPT code that you provide. And remember, CPT codes, in case people have forgotten, those are those 5-digit codes that say what kind of service you provide. You want to tell them every CPT code that's like, whether it's a individual session 60 minutes, or it's a couples session 50 minutes, or it's a diagnostic intake session, it's those 5-digit codes, 90837, 90847. Okay, so where do we say? Okay, so then you've got your letter. They tell you where to send it, but then kind of ignore them, and you definitely want to send it wherever they said to, but then also email it if you have an email address, fax it if you have a fax address, mail it, just like try to send it to everyone at the plan that you can. If you're in their EAP program, make sure you send a separate one to the EAP program, because that's kind of a separate, they sometimes are separate. So just basically send it to everyone and see who responds. Allow 4 to 6 weeks for response, and then obviously follow up if you get no response. Insurance plans are notorious for not responding sometimes to things they really don't want to deal with. And raise requests sometimes are things they don't want to deal with. My experience is sometimes you'll get a little postcard in the mail saying no really quickly from some, and they'll tell you, we have such a great website, we don't see why we need to pay you more, or we have done these great things for you since you joined, and we don't see what, it's like it's the same one that they send to everybody. It's not like customized for you in any way. And one plan I asked many years, I got the same one 10 years separated, like they still were cutting the same rejection letter, and it said the same things on it. So that was kind of funny. That's when I quit them after that. So I'll have to follow up if you get no response, make sure they got your letter. And then, I would say try again in 6 months if you get a rejection, but sometimes they will actually say, don't try again for 1 year, or don't try again for 2 years. They may actually tell you, we won't even consider your request again. I don't know if I'd bother listening to that. Can't hurt to try again in 6 months, right? I don't think they're keeping huge track, but I'd probably try again in 6 months, depending on how much you really want to get that raise.
Should I ask for specific dollar amounts for each CPT code I use? From Jill L.
Yes, definitely, Jill. Don't, yeah, because if we just write a letter to them and say, I want a raise, maybe they come back and they're like, okay, I'll give you $5, and you'll be like, what? That's not what I would have had in mind. It's better to write down every CPT code that you use or could possibly use, even ones you don't really use now, but maybe you would use in the future. Like maybe you're not doing couples work very often, but once in a while you do, you might as well, you're dipping into that well. Go ahead and ask for more money so that when you do start doing couples, or you do end up doing some couples work, you're already gonna get more for that. So go ahead and ask. And people are like, what do you think? How much should I ask for? Don't think you should be asking for like your usual fee. Like if your usual fee is 150 and right now you're getting paid 60, I don't think it's reasonable to go and say, hey, I want 150. The whole idea is that you're willing to accept a discount to be on an insurance plan, and in return, they're sending you a lot of their members, and so it's supposed to be kind of a deal. I encourage people, it's up to you, but I think a $20 increase is probably reasonable. They might go for it at the, But if you want to try more, that's fine.
How often can I request a raise? Is there a best time to ask for raises? From Jamal N. and Charles S.
Yeah, again, some insurance plans will say that they will only consider you after you've been with the plan for a period of time, maybe a year or two, or if you haven't asked for a raise in a year or two. Those are sometimes they'll say that, sometimes not. So if you haven't been given any directive, I would ask for one whenever you want to ask for one, and then if they refuse you, then wait a period of time, 6 months or a year. I guess one way I think about it is that I think a raise request often lands on somebody's desk over there at the health plan, and then maybe 6 months later it may land on somebody else's desk who has a different inclination, and you might get it. I just so see raise requests as a dice roll, and you just roll your dice as many times as you can, and you never know what the outcome's going to be. So I don't never think of insurance plan as this wildly organized, full of rules place. I think sometimes we just need to keep knocking at the door, and maybe somebody will let us in. It may not be the same person who last time told us to go away and not come back for a year. It may be you knock at the door after 6 months and they're like, oh, come on in, what do you want? So that's the way I look at it.
So, Barbara, you want to just go ahead and just talk a little bit about
I
this? You already
do.
mentioned it a second ago, but
Yeah, I thought long and hard. I don't usually give this special freebie out, but I wanted to do it for you guys. This is very special for me, but this is a sample raise request letter. Usually I only give this with people who are consulting with me about writing a raise request letter, but I thought, all right, for this one, I'm just going to give it out to you guys. It's a sample letter of you writing to a health plan and asking them for an increase, a rate request. And so you can see kind of how I would lay it out and kind of how to, it's really chock full of some possibilities. You can even use it as a template. You can borrow some of the sentences for you that apply to you or kind of rewrite them. So when you go to this, I want you to see this, the thing that's highlighted in yellow there, theinsurancemaze.com, write this down, theinsurancemaze.com/rates. You could go there now, but I don't want you to because I want you to still pay attention. theinsurancemaze.com/rates. You can not only download this letter, you can ask any follow-up questions you have from today. So if you're not interested in the letter, or if you are, I've also put a blank area there that you can just ask any of your personal follow-up questions specific to you or that didn't get answered today, and I will answer all of them. Or if you just want to join my mailing list and be notified of future webinars or other things that are going on or changes that are happening in the insurance world that affect you and your clients, definitely get on there. So the Insurance Maze, don't forget the insurancemaze.com/rates. I'm going to show you this again, but take a minute right now to write that down, and you can get your sample raise request letter.
give everybody just a second here.
Thanks.
All right.
And if you guys need help putting together yours, even after looking at this one, you're like, yeah, I still want help, writing my own, then that's something we can schedule a consultation and I can help you write your raise request letter.
All right. Now,
all right, so, yeah, resignations.
let's see. All right. What should I think about before I resign? Andrea S.
Okay, so obviously the first question, have you tried asking for a raise if money is the issue? A lot of people jump to resignation because they're really pissed off with the plan, or they're having trouble, or getting reimbursed, or they're having trouble reaching the plan or something. But a lot of the times it's just like, I don't want to just tolerate the low reimbursement rate. So be sure you've tried. If that's the main issue, ask for a raise first. Then when you leave, at least you've tried, right? Ask yourself a couple questions. How many clients come to you because you're contracted with that health plan? Is that a major referral source for you? and kind of look through your list of current clients and past clients and just try to, you know, what would that be like basically if that referral source goes away, which is number 3. Are you willing to work a little harder at marketing your practice if this referral source goes away? So some of us who work with insurance, we get a little comfy because, you know, sometimes a lot of our clients do come in the door because we are on their insurance plan directory, or they see on our websites that we take their insurance. And I think we have to recognize that we may need to fill empty slots in our practice ourselves in a whole different way. So we might have to work a little harder at marketing. And one thing that I would tell myself is if I'm going to quit, then any free hours I have, like free client hours, I'm going to use that hour to market. I'm going to have to think about how am I going to get butts in seats, as I say, and how am I going to get people who already have insurance to pay for my services even though they don't have insurance. Excuse me, even though I don't accept their insurance. Or I have to get people who don't have insurance to come to me. So, and then the 4th one here, how many of your current clients with that health plan can afford to see you if they have to pay privately? So I'd kind of go through and make calculations. Are you willing to lose some clients? And you definitely might lose some clients. I know when I have quit health plans in the past, I have lost some clients. And I had mixed feelings about that in terms of some of the people who really weren't willing to continue, even though I slid my scale. But anyway, just those are some of the things to think about. Yeah.
What are the steps to terminate a provider contract with an insurance company? From Sarah F.
All right. So this is a long slide here. Call the health plan provider relations department. Verify the amount of notice that's needed to resign. Many health plans, when you signed up with them, they told you that you needed 60 days notice, 90 days notice, a couple are 120 days notice. So what that's talking about, it could be 2, 3, 4 months notice you need to give them. So plan ahead here, and definitely ask the health plan. You can check your contract, but might as well, when you're calling them, ask them, how much notice do I need to give? Ask where to send your letter or your email to resign. And then while you're on the phone with them, ask them to list you as unavailable for new referrals. And write that resignation letter. And here's your chance to tell them why you're leaving. Give them a parting shot here and tell them if it's about rates, then you need to tell them. They need to be hearing why great providers are leaving them. And here's our chance for feedback. And give them your proposed effective date. I'll say more about that in a minute. So you count, if it's 3 months, count from when you're writing the letter and kind of say, you know, my determination is that I will be continuing to see clients with your plan for the next 3 months, whatever. Then email and fax and mail. Do that same thing we talked about before. Every contact information you have to everyone at that plan, and I don't mean your clients, I mean the plan itself, and send a separate letter to EAPs resigning. Just like tell them, everybody that you can, I'm gone. Then allow 4 weeks for response. Follow up if you get no response. And if you don't hear back from them within that 4 weeks, I'm sorry, that's the same thing as number 4. You are not off the plan until you get written confirmation, which states your end date. This is so important. I've seen many providers who didn't get that written confirmation. They thought they just counted 3 months or whatever. They thought they must be off. Turned out the plan never got there or never put their resignation into the database for whatever reason. It was a big mess. So definitely get some written confirmation in your hot little hands before you, and they may give you a different end date. I've had that happen probably 3 times, is that the date I thought, they came back and said, you know, we see that we got your resignation, your end date is blank blank, and it's a different date. Sometimes they're going to be 3 months from the date they received it. It might be 3 months from the end of the month that they received it. It might be 3 months from when they put it in their computer. So that's the important part. All right. Next.
Okay. If I leave a client's health plan, can I charge that client my regular private pay fee, or do I need to continue to offer my insurance discounted rate? From Jeremy N.
Yeah, usually there is nothing, unless there's something stated in your contract, usually you can offer your regular private pay fee. This client has now become a private pay client.
I've been avoiding resigning because of one client that I know can't afford to see me privately. Are there any options? From Pina D.
Yeah, sometimes you can, well, I was going to say something. I was saying, can you do that? Yeah, okay. So sometimes you can work out a special case agreement, it's called, with that insurance plan to continue to see one of their clients. And I did this with an insurance, United Behavioral Health, when I left them. One of their clients really couldn't afford to pay to see me privately. So it turned out that I worked out an agreement with UBH, and I continued to see her. I continued to act as a network provider for just her. And everything was pretty much the same, except I was able to actually negotiate a higher rate, strangely enough. So if you do a single case agreement, and they will sometimes do that because you are the person who knows that case intimately, and they don't really want this person to start over with someone else. And you'd have to argue that you are the one that can help them reach their treatment plan goals fastest, and that in the end, basically, you're going to cost least money for them to continue with you. But it's something you have to consider. And if you're ever thinking about a single case agreement, contact me. I'll tell you the pros and cons, but it is something that's a possibility.
Do you have to resign? How do you get off panels if you decide to not resign with one or more of them? From Alexandra W.
So you must keep honoring your contract with the plan until you resign and your resignation's effective. So if you get new health plan referrals, you can't say, well, I'm not taking any new insurance clients, but I'll see you if you pay privately. So whenever you're on a health plan, you can't say, well, I'm going to do a bait and switch. Basically, you're coming to me. I'm not taking insurance clients, but I'll see you if you pay privately. That can get you in big trouble. But if you don't want to take on new clients, you can either resign from the panel or tell them a potential new client you just don't have any openings, even if you do. So during that time, when you're in that resignation period, you're just going to have to chill about taking new people, and just be really honest about anyone who comes to you from that insurance plan and tell them you're in the process of getting off the panel.
Once I submit a resignation letter, what do I need to do then?
Okay, we'll try to go through this quickly. Tell your clients. Sometimes the insurance plan will reach out to any client that you have currently with that plan and say, hey, guess what? Your person is leaving our plan. So you want to be the first one to tell them. Discuss their ongoing treatment options. They can either continue to pay to see you and pay privately, that seems obvious, and remind them if they have a PPO or a POS plan, those are insurance plans, they may be able to get some kind of out-of-network reimbursement. So you may have to educate them about that. If you don't really understand that, talk to me and I'll help you understand more about that. Or another option, they can just end this chapter of therapy, or you can refer them perhaps to someone on their network or to some other self-help group in the area or whatever, if they don't want to continue or can't afford to continue. Document in your chart. This is so important. Your discussions, that you let them know, and what their response was. Every time you talk to them about ending and why and what discussions are, document, because ending is one of those situations that sometimes clients have complaints about. They can charge you with abandonment. They can charge that you left them, without any referrals. So you want to make sure that you document in your chart any referrals that were given, what you talked to them about, the options. I would even follow up with it. Number 4 there, send an email or a letter to the client following up on the conversation, officially notifying them of your end date and their options. Keep a copy of this in their chart. And if the client's going to continue to see you privately, have them sign a private pay agreement. Basically, it states, you understand now, I'm no longer going to be billing insurance. You're agreeing to pay privately. Here's how much you're going to be paying. You agree to all this. You understand all this. And I have a form like that available in my private practice, practice forms packet on my store page of my website.
All right. Well, Barbara, it looks like that was the last question here in the slide. You already
So
went over.
again, that's where to go. Theinsurancemaze.com. Write that down if you didn't. Rates, /rates. And that's where you get your sample raise request letter. You ask any follow-up questions, I will respond. Join my mailing list. There's also lots of other cool therapist resources I'm going to put on that page so you can check it out.
All right, so we do have a couple of questions that we might be able to get to. I'll just throw it to you. Can I compare a higher paying insurance to a lower paying to get equal rates?
That's a great question. I have struggled with whether I should or shouldn't. I have said that your rate is no longer commensurate or competitive or whatever the word is I'm thinking of with the other plans in our area, including, and I give 2 that are paying me higher than this. So I've done it. So I don't know. It's a hard one to know whether they will be offended by it, but I think it's important to call them out and say, if UCRs or allowed amounts are based on what's the going rate, they're no longer competitive. The going rate is what other insurance plans are paying for that same rate. I think it's important to tell them.
Okay, well, let me throw one more at you. Let's see. How can those who are still provisionally licensed and gaining supervision prepare to get onto insurance panels ASAP once independently licensed?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the problems is some of the big insurance plans will want you to be licensed 2 years or 3 years before you can even join a panel. We did a whole presentation with Ask a Biller on joining plans, so you may want to watch that, which is, I think that's stored on that archive page there that we were talking about earlier. Don't hold off applying, but some of the smaller plans might allow you as soon as you're licensed to go ahead and join. Try to get on those, but apply for everyone and see what they do. But you just have to, as soon as you're ready to go, just have a list of insurance plans that you want to apply to, start making phone calls, and try to get on them. But again, just be prepared that many of the bigger plans, maybe the Blue Cross Blue Shields, maybe some of the big ones are going to say you need to wait until you've been licensed 2 or 3 years, unless in your area they're really needing therapists, which they may not be. So go ahead and, again, don't let anything keep you down. Just go ahead and apply anyway. And definitely watch that video that we did for Ask a Biller about joining plans. That I think will be helpful.
All right, cool. We are out of time here. So everybody,
Okay.
thanks for joining. And Barbara, thanks so much for going ahead and
Hey,
answering
my
this question.
pleasure. Thanks everyone for coming.